Okay, so welcome back to the session. So we have spent sessions 1 through 3 building the conceptual architecture of policy science, why policies emerge, how agendas are shaped, and how alternatives are formulated and adopted. So today we cross some sort of a threshold. We move from the design to delivery, from the legislative chamber and the planning office of the Barangay Health Center, the Municipal Social Welfare Office, and the DWSD frontline worker who hands a conditional cash transfer to a family in, let's say, Quezon City or Samar. So implementation is where policies live or die. A technically excellent policy with poor implementation produces worse outcomes compared to a mediocre policy that is faithfully and adaptively executed. No, sabi nga sa strategy focused organization, the author of Balanced Scorecards, 90 to 95% of the failures of companies come from poor execution. So understanding why implementation succeeds or fails and who has the power to shape it is the most practically valuable competency we will develop in this course. So let's get into it. Okay, so we have 5 segments today, 12 minutes on implementation theory. So we will just focus on this. And then the top-down and bottom debate that has defined implementation and scholarship since Pressman and Wildavsky's landmark 1973 study. So we will then move to Lipsky's street-level bureaucracy, probably the single most influential theory of practicing public administrator. Yan, tatandaan nyo itong mga authors na to, no? And then we go to the stakeholder analysis and the power interest grid. We will be applying these ideas to the Philippine LGU dynamics under Public Act 7160. And then the last, it will be our case study and stakeholder mapping workshop using the 4 piece program, followed by our journaling. Okay, let's move. All right, so the implementation problem. So Jeffrey Pressman and Aaron Wildavsky opened the modern era of implementation. The implementation research in 1973 with a deceptively simple question. Very simple question. Why do programs with good design, adequate funding, and genuine political support so often fail to achieve their intended outcomes? Diba? So their study of an economic development administration program in Oakland, California found that a program requiring sign-off from 70 separate decision points, dami, no? Each with a high probability of approval had a combined probability of success approaching zero. So this is exactly what's happening even in magtawag dito sa operations yung tinatawag na throughput rate, no? So kahit mataas ang probability of approval with the sheer number of decision points, the probability of success will approach zero. Actually 70 to sa operations management, even 30 it will approach zero already. So the implementation gap, as they called it, was not the exception in government programs. It is actually the rule more than the exception. So the top-down model assumes that implementation is fundamentally a problem of organizational control. The central authority designs a policy with clear goals, assigns responsibilities to specific agencies, establishes monitoring systems, and expects subordinate actors to comply with the authoritative mandate. Success is measured by fidelity to the original policy intent. The key variables for top-down theorists, Masmanian and Sabatier in particular here, are the clarity of the statutory objectives, the quality of the causal theory embedded in the policy, and the capacity of the implementing agency to comply. So the top-down model works best no, when policy goals are unambiguous. So syempre kailangan clear, the implementation technology is well understood, and the implementing agencies have both the capacity and the political will to act consistently. Large-scale infrastructure programs often fit this profile reasonably well. The Philippine rollout of the Senior Citizens Act with the standardized benefits schedules issued by DSWD and clear legal obligations on LGUs, that is a reasonable top-down case. No? So the bottom-up model naman, critics of the top-down model, particularly Michael Lipsky and Richard Elmore, they argued that it fundamentally misunderstood where policy actually happened. Elmore's concept of backward mapping suggested that implementation analysis should begin not at the top with legislative intent but at the bottom with specific behaviors of frontline workers that need to change for the policy to achieve its goals. So work backward from there to identify what organizational and political conditions would be needed to produce these behaviors. So bottom-up scholars argued that street-level actors who deliver services have not just discretion but authority. Their collective behavior is what the policy actually is. So barangay DRRM coordinators, public school teachers deciding how to allocate the supplemental feeding supplies, rural health midwives choosing which families to prioritize for home visits. These actors are not implementing a policy so much as creating it through accumulated daily decisions. So, kumbaga, in short, parang yung implementation nila, the way it's done on the streets, they are actually the one making the decisions and implementing the policy, di ba? So, as a synthesis of this, yung neither of the model naman is sufficient alone. Top-down frameworks provide accountability and measurable targets. Given yan, that is essential for equity. Bottom-up frameworks capture adaptation and discretion. And that is essential for effectiveness. So, top-down equity, bottom-up effectiveness. So most serious implementation scholars now advocate a hybrid, dapat hybrid. Top-down for accountability, framework, and core resource allocation, and then bottom-up for operational design and local adaptation. No? So think of a national government program you have worked up or studied. Gumagamit ba siya ng top-down or bottom-up implementation approach, di ba? So yan. Tapos yung approach bang yun, did the approach match the nature of the problem it was trying to solve? That is a good question, di ba? Okay, now the next slide is focusing on the street-level bureaucracy by Michael Lipsky in the 1980. Imagine, no, 1980 pa to, pero kung titingnan nyo, most of the claims are still very much in place. Not only here in the Philippines, but almost everywhere. Okay, so street-level bureaucracy. Ang core claim nito, no, the core claim of Michael Lipsky in the 1980 book, Street-Level Bureaucracy, you know. So, sabi niya doon, actually, yung book na yan pala is one of the most read and reread works in public administration for one simple reason. It describes what actually happens in government in a way that every frontline worker immediately recognizes as true. Sabi ni Lipsky, no, he argued that the real policymakers in human services, education, health, welfare, policing, housing, so lahat, no? I should have said policing, no? They are not the legislators, no? Cabinet secretaries or NEDA planners, yung mga taga-NEDA. Hindi sila yon, yung mga nagde-design ng program. They are actually the teachers, the social workers themselves, the health workers, and police officers who interact directly with citizens in conditions of chronic overload and inadequate resources. So, kumbaga, yung mukha nung implementation is not actually the legislation, no? Kung hindi, yung mga actual na nakaharap sa mga tao. That is not a peripheral phenomenon, no? When you aggregate the discretionary decisions of all the social workers implementing the 4 Ps across all the 81 provinces, sino yung binibisita, how conditionality is verified, how disputes about eligibility are resolved, you have produced what the 4 Ps actually is at the level of the citizen experience. So the policy that the Congress passed and DSWD designed is not the policy that families in Samar or Bicol or in Taguig would actually receive. So, wala ka namang magagawa nun eh. That is actually the case. That is actually the reality of the ball game. Okay? So, yan. Discretion is not a bug but a feature. Lipsky, according to him, no, he insisted that discretion is not a design flaw, to be eliminated through tighter rules or stronger monitoring. It is inherent, so innate na yan, kasama na yan, unavoidable feature of any policy that deals with complex human situations. No set of rules can fully specify how a social worker should respond to a family experiencing domestic violence while simultaneously applying for poor peace benefits, or how a barangay health worker should prioritize home visits when she has 40 families assigned and 4 hours available. Diba? Reality bites eh. The discretion is not a problem. The conditions under which it is exercised are. Okay, so ano yung mga coping mechanism dan? When demand systematically exceeds the capacity to respond, which Lipsky argued is the normal condition for street-level bureaucrats, it's not the exception, no, but the normal condition. Workers develop coping mechanisms to manage the impossible gap. They ration by availability. First come, first serve, di ba? Yun ang sasabihin nila. It creates the appearance of objectivity while systematically disadvantaging those with the least access to information and institutions. First come, first serve, di sino yung pinakamalalakas ang boses, pinakamabilis gumalaw, yung mga merong access dun sa information, sila yung nauuna sa harapan. Eh, paano yung mga talaga nasa liblib na po na talagang nangangailangan, walang kasama, walang magdadala sa kanila, may sakit, 'di ba? So, yan ang problem dun, no? So, they allocate disproportionate attention to cases that are easiest to close successfully, yung cream of the crop na tinatawag. They inflate their own performance metrics while neglecting the most difficult and most vulnerable clients, 'di ba? Dinadaan sa numbers, alam na naman natin 'yan, mabilis ang score, madami tayong nagawa. Pero na-serve ba talaga yung tunay na dapat i-serve? No, they develop default routines, standard operating procedures that reduce cognitive load but reduce responsiveness to individual circumstances. And they develop psychological distancing, protective mechanisms that allow them to function emotionally in the face of an overwhelming need. So in the Philippine context, for example, the DSWD social worker who visits 35 four-piece families per week on a motorcycle across dispersed barangays, he or she is not being lazy when he or she relies on default routines. She is surviving an impossible job. The policy implication is that you cannot reform street level outcomes by exhorting workers to do better. You have to change the conditions, the caseloads, the resources, supervision, support systems that should produce coping behavior, or I would say produce better coping behavior. So policy distortion, the cumulative effect of SLB, discretion, and coping across thousands of workers and millions of interactions is what Lipsky called policy distortion. The systematic divergence between policy as designed and policy as experienced by citizen. No, merong disconnect yan. A social protection program designed to be universal and equitable may in practice reach the organized, the educated, and the already connected. Because those are the clients who navigate bureaucratic processes most effectively. A pro-poor policy can produce anti-poor outcomes at the street level without any individual worker acting in bad faith. Hindi naman kailangan sila nag-iisip na, hindi na iniisip yun eh. Basta mahalaga, wala naman akong magagawa eh. Ito lang yung, ang ano natin, ito lang ating resources, first come, first serve. Ito yung pumunta, wala tayong magagawa dito, di ba? Kung tutuusin, no? So the key practical implication there, no? If you want to know what the policy actually does, do not read the law or implementing rules. Go to the front line. Shadow a social worker for a day, for example. Sit in a barangay health center during a peak hour or the peak hours. The gap between what you observe there and what the policy document says, that is the implementation gap. And fixing it requires understanding Lipsky's mechanism, not just issuing stronger directives. Kahit na lang maghapon tayong magdaldalan, di ba, pag may nagkamali, litisin nyo sa Senado or whatever, in the end, it will always remain the same. Because wala naman, ano yan, mga tao lang yung mga yan. Marami silang kakulangan, no? Hindi yan talaga minsan 'no, hindi yan sinasadya. Although sila yung nabibigyan ng matinding ano diyan 'no, sa optics, sila yung masama. Pero in reality, wala, eh, they just can't do anything better with the kind of resources and context that they have. Okay. No, so why stakeholder analysis is a core competency? Every policy implementation process involves a network of actors with different interests, different degrees of power, and different relationships to the implementing agency. Failure to map and strategically engage this network is one of the most common causes of implementation failure in the Philippine, at least in our case, no, in the Philippine public sector. Budgets are correctly allocated. Naman, may budget naman, 'di ba? Implementing agencies are nominally capable. Tingnan mo sa papel, ayos naman, may mga PhD pa minsan, no? And the policy design is technically sound. But the program fails because a powerful stakeholder who was never properly engaged becomes a blocker, or a community organizations with deep local knowledge is excluded and the program reaches the wrong beneficiaries. Sometimes nangyayari lahat ng yun all at the same time. So the power interest grid developed by the management literature by Mendelov in 1991, and widely applied in public policy by Bryson and the others, provides a simple but powerful framework for mapping stakeholders and deciding how to engage them. The two axes are the power, okay, the ability to influence the policy's implementation, and interest, the degree to which the stakeholder is affected by or engaged with the policy outcome. So, tingnan natin yung four quadrants in practice, no? So, stakeholders with a high power and high interest are the ones you must manage closely. High power, high interest, kailangan manage closely. For a major social protection reform, those would typically include the Secretary of the SWD, the chairs of the Senate and House Committees on Social Welfare, the NEDA Director General, the PhilHealth Board. Resistance from any of these actors can stop implementation on its tracks. Your engagement strategy must be proactive, continuous, and substantive, not ceremonial consultation. Kailangan manage closely. So stakeholders naman with high power but low interest keep satisfied. The Department of Budget and Management holds enormous power over implementation through budget release, right? And cash programming, but is often not deeply engaged in the programmatic substance of social protection. They become interested and can become blockers if they perceive that the program is creating fiscal risk or procurement violation. So your job, if you're the one lobbying for this, is to ensure that the fiscal management dimension of your program are airtight. Okay, keep your bases clean. No, talagang dinidila mo dapat yan. And clearly communicate to the DBM before they become alarmed. Okay? Low power but high interest stakeholders. Keep informed. Okay? Walang masyadong power yan pero mataas ang interest niyan. Mga beneficiary organization, academic researchers, studying your program, community-based organization in implementation areas, advocacy CSOs, all of them fall here. Their power to block is limited, but they have two things that matter enormously: information about what is actually happening on the street level, and legitimacy to speak credibly about the program outcomes. If you exclude them, you lose your best source of real-time implementation intelligence. If you ignore their concerns, they will find ways to amplify them through media, social media lalo, no, Congress, or international channels. So finally, we have the low power, low interest. Wala nang power, wala pa namang interest, no? So you should monitor them. They are peripheral today, but can move quadrants quickly if circumstances change. International observers, walang power, walang interest, no? 'Di ba? Mga international observers of the four Ps, for instance, they are normally in the monitor quadrant until a major implementation scandal would put the program under international scrutiny, at which point they become relevant to the institutional agenda conversation. Unang-una, apektado tayo dyan, yung ating itsura natin, no, sa international, yung reputation natin. Maapektuhan tayo dyan. Even yung ating um, rating, no, credit rating. Pag nangyari yun, yari. Kaya kailangan i-monitor natin yan, no? So, strategic insight, the power interest grid is a snapshot. It's not a permanent map. No? Stakeholder positions shift as programs evolve. So, as administrators change, nagbabago yung administration, as external events alter the political landscape. The analyst who maps stakeholders once at a program launch and never updates the map is flying blind by the midterm. So, kailangan i-monitor natin din nasaan sila at saan sila doon sa grid. Okay, dito naman tayo sa may Philippine LGU Implementation Dynamics. Okay? So dito, ang RA 7160, yung Local Government Code of 1991, fundamentally restructured who is responsible for implementing social, health, agricultural, and environmental programs in the Philippines. LGUs, provinces, cities, municipalities, and barangays were given authority and resources that had previously resided in national agencies. The intent was to bring government closer to the people, increase local responsiveness, and allow for context-sensitive adaptation. The reality has been more complicated. The IRA-dependent fiscal structure of most LGUs, ayan, kung nandiyan yung 80% of or more of the revenues come from national transfers rather than locally generated income. No? So it means that fiscal autonomy has remained largely theoretical. LGUs with limited own source revenues have limited capacity to innovate beyond the nationally prescribed minimum standards of program. So for example, meron tayong 6th class, no? Mababa na nga yung 4th class, pero halimbawa, a municipality in Sarangani province, 6th class municipality, implementing the 4Ps on the same national template as a city in Metro Manila, you would face radically different implementation conditions with radically different resources. Yung Mandanas-Garcia ruling implemented starting in 2022 significantly expanded the LGU revenue shares but also exposed a structural problem. Many national agencies that quietly reclaim functions from LGU that were supposed to have been devolved in 1992. DILG and NEDA have been managing a complex redevolution process to align actual practice with the constitutional mandate with mixed results so far. Okay? So naman tayo sa principal agent challenge. So yung national agencies that design and fund programs must rely on LGU agents to implement them. This creates a classic principal agent problem. The agent's incentive, priorities, capacity, and information are different from the principals. So yung national program designed by DSWD with uniform conditionality requirements will be implemented by municipal social welfare officers whose primary political accountability runs to their local mayor ang hindi doon sa DSWD secretary. So pag merong tension between the national program requirements and the local political priorities, the local political accountability often would win, especially in the months before an election. Ando doon ang boto di ba? So effective national agencies have developed sophisticated responses to this challenge. Performance-based grants that reward LGU compliance, embedded national staff who would provide technical assistance and oversight, third-party monitoring by CSOs and academic institutions, and participatory monitoring mechanisms that give beneficiaries channels to report implementation problems directly to the national level. None of these solutions, walang perfect dyan, no? But together, they represent the best available toolkit to managing principal agent tensions in a devoted system. So kita nyo, no, talagang politics pa rin na nagra-run ng game na yan. Wala kang magagawa talagang ganun na nangyayari. Merong national agenda, meron ding LGU, no? So kaya yung iba, lalo na natin again, kung titingnan niyo yung kagandahan sana ng federal form of government, no? Na hindi lang naman sa atin, no? Tinatry i-implement kundi even sa Germany, for example, sa US, 'di ba? It's been going on for quite some time. Ngayon, ang tanong lang siyempre ng karamihan diyan, is it going to work here with all the politics involved? Baka mas lalo maging worse tuloy, no? Pero kung titingnan mo 'yon, yung mga allocation na yan, yung mga problem na yan, hindi na yan magiging problem ito, yung principal agent. Kasi nandoon na kayo on the LGU level eh. Supposed to be, kayo na yan. Yung kailangan nyo, andiyan dyan sa inyo. Kayong magsosolve ng sarili nyong mga concerns at problem kasi hindi na nyo kailangan hingin lahat yan sa national. Walang misalignment ng national agenda sa kanong LGU kasi you know, parang sa US, no? Meron kang federal na sinusunod, which is the national level, pero ang pinaka mas powerful talaga yung nandoon ah, sa mismong federal state or whatever no, sa atin, anong tatawag natin kung sakali. Kaso mukhang malayo-layo pang labanan yan, no? So yung political cycles and implementation continuity, the 3-year local election cycle is one of the most underappreciated drivers of implementation variability in the Philippines. Pag nagpalit ng local chief executive, yung sinasabi nga natin, even without a formal policy reversal, it disrupts the ongoing programs in ways that are profound and often invisible in national program statistics. Key municipal staff are reallocated. Relationship with barangay officials built over the years by previous administrations na reset. Lalo kung iba-iba na naman yung mga taong nandiyan dyan. Uusapan na naman yan. Program priorities are resignaled in frontline workers who understand very clearly which programs the new mayor cares about and which ones they can safely deprioritize. Diba? Pabago-bago. So the ASEAN parallel, on the other hand, this principal agent in political cycle challenge is replicated at the regional level. ASEAN commits its member states to implement community vision targets, but ASEAN has no equivalent of the DILG to monitor subnational compliance. So the Philippine LGU implementation architecture with all its imperfections is actually more developed, if you will look at it, than the most ASEAN member states' domestic frameworks for subnational policy delivery. Wala pa, hindi pa talaga ganun ka-highlighted or ka-united yung tinatawag natin yung ating ASEAN Economic Community, no? Okay, let's go now to the case study and workshop. So ano natin to meron tayong again nakalagay na naman dito yung small group discussion but this will just be included in your assignment next week. Okay? So last week the final no, final ano na natin, final session. Okay, so the 4Ps as an implementation laboratory. Yung Pantawid Pamilyang Pilipino program, 4P is the largest social protection program in Philippine history and one of the most studied conditional cash transfer programs in the Southeast Asia. By the way, mayroon akong sinulat na paper tungkol dito. No? Pahanap nyo na lang po. Yung sa, I think, Asian Financial Economics and Policy. I can send you the link in our journal. So, meron akong sinulat na paper tungkol dito, no? So, ano ba siya? Talaga bang nakakatulong ba siya o hindi? At nag-review tayo ng mga ano niya, no, ng mga articles. So, tama yung sinasabi dito, no, na talagang one of the most studied conditional cash transfer yan in Southeast Asia with approximately 4.4 million household beneficiaries across all 81 provinces. It is both an implementation success story in a way, no, in scale, reach, and documented poverty reduction impact, and a laboratory of implementation challenges that illuminates every theory we have discussed today. The program is implemented primarily through the DSWD, social workers who are responsible for verifying conditionality compliance, resolving grievances, updating beneficiary records, and facilitating graduation. Yung listahanan targeting system, a proxy means test that uses a national household survey to classify families as poor or near poor, determines sino yung eligible. So yung education conditionality requires beneficiary children to also maintain 85% social school attendance. Health conditionalities include prenatal checkups, child vaccinations, and family development session. So the most contentious implementation issue in recent years has been the graduation policy. When should beneficiaries who have measurably improved their economic situation be removed from the program? Kailan sila dapat ma-remove? And what support system should be in place when they exit? The SWD has developed graduation criteria, but implementation has been inconsistent. Some regions graduate families aggressively, Others resist graduation because of local officials believe it is politically unpopular. No, pag natanggal ka, paano ka na? Yung dating ng Pilipino doon parang hindi naman na successful ka na, "Ay, magaling na pala ako. Hindi na pala ako mahirap." Hindi gano'n, eh. Nawala yung ano mo, nawala yung cash transfer mo, 'di ba? Textbook case yan of a street-level bureaucratic discretion producing divergent outcomes across similar population, 'no? So, makikita natin 'yan. So, sa inyong assignment, dahil hindi natin 'to magagawa ngayon dito, you should identify at least the actors, no, in the 4Ps across formulation, implementation, evaluation. Tapos ilagay nyo siya dun sa power interest grid. Identify at least one stakeholder you believe is currently misclassified, put in the wrong quadrant by the DSWD or the program designer. So kumbaga meron diyang mga stakeholders na mali yung classification even by the government. Akala mo nandito sa kabila, yung pala nasa kabila siya. So mag-identify tayo ng mga tao or mga stakeholders nandun, no? Okay, this is now the session wrap up and reflective journal number 4. So connecting today to the course arc, we now have 4 of the 6 stages of the policy cycle covered in depth. We have traced how problems become agenda items, how agenda items become policy alternatives, how alternatives are adopted, and today, how adopted policies become or fail to become implemented programs. Session 5 would complete the cycle. We will look at the policy evaluation, evidence-based governance, and the future of digital and sustainable policy, and how everything we have covered fits together as an integrated analytical framework. So before then, yung reflective journal natin, nandito naman, we have 3 questions here. 350 to 250 words in total. Write your professional experiences where possible. And this material is most valuable when grounded in real cases, particularly yung mga cases na witness nyo by your own eyes o kaya lalo na pag align sa inyong work, no? So ayan, pakibasa nyo lang po, nandiyan dyan naman, no? Number 1, number 2, and then number 3. Yung nilalagay ko dito ng mga word count, of course, wag niyo mang sundin lang yan, no? Kasi 350 to 450, napaka-ano lang po niyan, no? Napaka-liit po ng number of words na yan. Dahil because my undergrad students would produce bawat isang question nasa 1,000 ano yan, words, no? Hindi naman sa pinapahaba natin, but you can always, discuss it deeply. All right, so yeah, that's it. So thank you very much and have a great weekend ahead of you. Bye bye.